There is a morning in one episode of this show where a tired mother rushes out the door of a chaotic house, late as always, carrying a box of donuts for her family, and she drops it. And in the half second it takes for the box to fall toward the floor, her whole life flashes through her mind. Every choice she ever made, every other life she could have had, the career she gave up, the parents she left behind, the roads she did not take, all of it laid out in an instant. The question hanging there in the air with the falling donuts: what if I had chosen differently? And when the box finally hits the ground and the moment passes, she looks up at her loud, broke, impossible, beloved family, and she realizes that she would not trade a single thing. That she would choose this life, this exact chaotic life, again and again, every time. That moment is from The Amazing World of Gumball, a show that looks, from the outside, like the most hyperactive, chaotic, random comedy on television. A riot of noise and color and absurdity aimed squarely at children. And underneath all that chaos, it is quietly one of the wisest shows ever made, stuffed with genuine, hard-won wisdom about money and love, and family, and the meaning of life itself. Tonight, we are going to dig them all out, slowly, the life-changing lessons hidden inside the chaos. So get comfortable, turn the lights down low, we will be here a while, and if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep these going. Let us begin with that mother, and those donuts, and the life she chose. First, the ground we stand on. The Amazing World of Gumball was created by Ben Boaklet for Cartoon Network, and it premiered in the spring of 2011. It ran for 6 seasons, ending in June of 2019. Across 240 episodes, and it became one of the most distinctive-looking shows in the history of the network. Famous for its wild mixed-media animation, a style that threw together hand-drawn characters, puppets, photographs of real places, and a dozen other techniques into a single chaotic frame, so that the world of the show looked like nothing else on television, a town where every character seemed to be drawn in a different style, and somehow they all lived together. It came back years later, in a revival that arrived in 2025, proof of how beloved it remained. But it is the original run we are spending the night with, the 6 seasons of beautiful chaos set in a town called Elmore. At the center of it is the Watterson family, and you should know them before we begin, because the lessons live in them. There is Gumball, a 12-year-old blue cat, the hero, a boy whose confidence enormously outpaces his competence, forever launching into schemes that spiral into disaster. There is Darwin, his adopted brother, a goldfish who grew legs and became a person, the sweetest and most loyal soul in the show. There is Anais, their little sister, a small pink rabbit who happens to be a genius, the smartest and most exasperated member of the family. There is Nicole, the mother, a cat, the one holding the whole thing together, working herself to exhaustion to keep the family afloat. And there is Richard, the father, a large pink rabbit, lazy and childish and useless in almost every practical way, and also, somehow, full of a strange, accidental love. Together they are a mess, a loud, broke, dysfunctional, deeply loving mess. And the show spends 6 seasons mining that mess for comedy and, when you least expect it, for genuine wisdom. So here is how I am going to approach tonight, because it is a little different from how we usually do this. This is not a mystery or a controversy. This is a search for the lessons, and so I am going to be doing more interpretation than usual, drawing meaning out of the episodes, and I want to be honest that the lessons are my reading, and the reading of the many people who have found this show surprisingly profound, rather than a claim that the writers sat down to teach a philosophy seminar. What I will keep accurate is the canon, the actual events of the episodes, what really happens on screen, which I have checked. The wisdom I draw from those events is interpretation, offered as interpretation. The meaning a thoughtful viewer can find in a show that turns out to be far deeper than its chaotic surface ever lets on. The show is genuinely willing to tackle the largest things, the meaning of life, the fear of being forgotten, the weight of the choices that make us who we are. And tonight, we are going to follow it into all of them. Let us start with the most practical lesson of all, the one about money, because it is the one almost everyone needs and almost no show for children dares to actually tell the truth about. The first thing to understand, the thing that makes Gumball braver than almost any other show for children, is that the Wattersons are poor, genuinely, precariously poor, living paycheck to paycheck, one disaster away from losing everything, and the show never hides it or prettifies it. Most family shows for kids quietly place their families in a comfortable middle class where money is never a worry, where the house is nice and the fridge is full, and nobody ever has to choose between paying a bill and buying groceries. Gumball does the opposite. It puts a real financial struggle at the center of the family, a mother working herself to the bone at a job she hates to keep the lights on, a father who contributes nothing, a constant low hum of not quite having enough. and it treats that struggle with honesty, lets the kids feel the weight of it, refuses to pretend that money is not a real and pressing thing in a real family's life. There is an episode built entirely around this, where the family's money, in the strange logic of the show, simply runs out, and the consequences ripple through their whole world. And what the episode does with it is the lesson, because as everything falls apart, as the family faces the genuine fear of having nothing, it does not pretend that money does not matter, that being poor is secretly fine, that you should just be happy with nothing. That would be a lie, and the show is too honest for it. Instead, it makes a subtler and truer point, which is that while money matters, it is not the thing the family is actually built on. That when everything else is stripped away, what remains is the family itself, the love between them, and that this remaining thing, the love, is the actual foundation, the thing that was holding them up all along while they thought it was the money. Gumball, in the middle of the disaster, reminds them of the joys they have that cost nothing, pushes them back toward each other, and the family discovers that they can survive almost anything as long as they have not lost the one thing that was never for sale. The lesson, and I will mark it as my reading drawn from the episode, is one of the most useful and most commonly forgotten truths there is. Money is real, and the lack of it is a real hardship, and the show does not insult you by pretending otherwise. But money is a foundation for life, not the substance of it. It keeps the lights on so that the actual living, the love and the laughter and the being together, can happen underneath them. And the trap that so many people fall into, the trap the show is quietly warning against, is mistaking the foundation for the building, spending your whole life accumulating the means to live while forgetting to actually live, working so hard to afford a good life that you never have time to have one. The Wattersons are poor and they are happy, not because poverty is good, it is not, but because they never made the mistake of believing that money was the point. They kept their eyes on the thing that actually mattered, each other, and that is why losing the money, terrifying as it was, could never quite break them. But the deepest lesson the show ever taught about a life, the one that has made grown adults weep, comes from the mother Nicole in the episode I opened with, the one with the donuts. To understand it, you have to understand Nicole, because she is the load-bearing wall of the whole family. The one who gave up the most and works the hardest and holds everything together while getting almost no thanks for it. And in this episode, the show finally stops to ask what that cost her, to look at the life she actually chose and the lives she gave up to choose it. As she drops the donuts and her life flashes before her, we see the choices, the branching points, the moments where her life could have gone another way. We see her as a young woman with enormous potential, a brilliant fighter, a person who could have been almost anything. We see her parents, strict and demanding, who had a different life planned for her. And we see the choice that changed everything. The choice to be with Richard, the lazy, useless gentle boy her parents despised. The choice that cost her their approval and her other future, and very nearly everything she was supposed to become. The episode shows it as a montage, her whole life with Richard set to a piano, from the day they met as children playing in a park, through their awkward teenage years, through the terrible argument that estranged her from her own mother, who cried as Nicole walked away from the future she had been promised, and into an uncertain life with a boy who had nothing to offer but himself. And the show lets you feel the full weight of what she gave up, the brilliant career, the parents' love, all the other Nicoles she could have been. And then it lets you feel the answer. Because at the end of the montage, surrounded by the chaos of the family that choice created, Nicole understands, with total clarity, that she would do it all again, that she would trade none of it, that the life she chose, the broke, loud, exhausting, imperfect life with Richard and the kids, is the life she wanted, the only life she wanted, and that all the grander futures she gave up were not losses, but simply other roads she was glad not to have walked. That is one of the most profound things a piece of children's television has ever said, and the lesson in it is enormous, because every adult life is built on a foundation of roads not taken, of other selves we could have been, of the constant quiet question, what if I had chosen differently? And that question can poison a life, can fill it with regret, with the nagging sense that the real life, the better life, was the one you did not choose. Nicole's lesson is the cure for that poison, and it is not that she made the perfect choice, because there is no perfect choice. Every road costs you all the other roads. Her lesson is that peace does not come from having chosen perfectly. It comes from choosing to love the life you actually chose, from turning toward the family you have rather than mourning the futures you do not, from deciding again and again that this life, this real and imperfect and specific life, is the one you want. The donuts fall, and 1,000 other lives flash past, and Nicole looks at her messy kitchen and her impossible family and chooses them one more time, and in that choosing, she is free. That is the secret. Not choosing perfectly, choosing to love what you chose. If the Choices episode is the show's lesson about how to live a life, there is another episode that takes on the even larger question of why to live one at all. And it does it with the show's characteristic mix of comedy and surprising depth. In it, Gumball and Darwin set out with the casual confidence of children to answer the meaning of life, and their method is wonderfully simple. They just go around their town and ask everyone. They ask the people of Elmore, one by one, what the meaning of life is, and the answers they get are the whole point, because everyone gives a different one. Some say it is love, some say it is family, or work, or pleasure, or faith, or simply survival. Some give answers that are funny, some that are sad, some that are profound. And no two are quite the same. The boys go looking for the answer, the single definitive answer to the biggest question there is. And what they find instead is a town full of different answers, each one true for the person who gave it. And that is the lesson, and it is a more sophisticated piece of philosophy than most adults ever quite arrive at. Because we are raised somehow to believe that the meaning of life is a single thing, a hidden answer, a secret that the wise have found and the rest of us are still searching for, and that if we could just figure it out, just discover the one true purpose, everything would fall into place. And Gumball, in this silly episode about a cat and a fish interviewing a town, quietly dismantles that whole idea. There is no single answer. There is never going to be a single answer. The meaning of life is not a fact waiting to be discovered. The same for everyone hidden somewhere out in the world. It is something each person makes, or finds, or chooses particular to them. And the search for the one universal answer is itself the mistake, a category error, looking for a single key to a lock that opens differently for everyone. The show even shows you the danger of the search, because the more seriously Gumball takes the question, the more it paralyzes him, the more the great unanswerable why threatens to freeze him in place, unable to act because he cannot first solve the riddle of why he should act at all. And that is the trap of the question, the way that staring too long into the great why can stop you from living the very life whose meaning you are trying to find. The cure, the show suggests, is not to find the answer but to stop demanding, one, to accept that meaning is made in the living rather than discovered before it, to get up and love your family and do your work and chase your small joys, and to let the meaning accumulate quietly in the doing rather than waiting, frozen, for it to be handed to you first. The meaning of life, the episode gently says, is not a question to be answered. It is a life to be lived, and the living is the answer. There is a darker and stranger episode that teaches a lesson just as large, and it is about the deepest fear underneath the question of meaning, the fear of not mattering, the fear of being forgotten. It introduces a place called the Void, and the Void is one of the most haunting ideas the show ever produced. It is where the world's mistakes go. When something goes wrong in the world, when a thing happens that should not have, when a person is too strange or too inconsistent, or, most chillingly, too boring, the world simply erases them, sucks them out of reality and into the void. And then everyone forgets they ever existed. The episode follows the disappearance of a student named Molly, a girl so unremarkable that the world has begun to erase her for the crime of being forgettable. And Gumball and Darwin have to journey into the void to bring her back before she is gone forever, before she becomes a person who never was. The horror of that premise is real, and so is the lesson hidden in it. Because the void is the externalized shape of one of the most universal human fears, the fear that you do not matter, that you are unremarkable, that you will pass through the world without leaving a mark, and that when you are gone, no one will remember you were ever here. Molly is being erased for being boring, and there is hardly a person alive who has not feared in some dark moment that they too are boring, unremarkable, the kind of person the world would not notice the absence of. And the show takes that fear seriously, makes it literal, makes it a place you can be sucked into, and then it does the crucial thing: it sends its heroes to fight against it, to insist that Molly matters, that no one is a mistake, that being unremarkable is not the same as being worthless, that even the most forgettable person is a person worth saving and worth remembering. The lesson, drawn out, is a quiet act of mercy toward everyone who has ever felt small. You are not a mistake. Being ordinary is not a crime, and being forgettable in the eyes of an indifferent world does not mean you do not matter. The void erases people for being boring, and the heroes of the show reject that judgment utterly, risk everything to pull a forgotten girl back into existence. Because the show believes all the way down, that every single person matters regardless of how remarkable they are, that the value of a life is not measured in how memorable it is or how much of a mark it leaves. There is a cruel voice in the world, and sometimes in our own heads, that says you must be exceptional to be worth anything, that the ordinary and the forgettable deserve to be erased. The void is that voice given a form, and the whole episode is the show standing against it, insisting, on behalf of every ordinary, forgettable person watching, including you, that you are not a mistake, that you matter, that you are worth pulling back from the dark. Let us come back to the family, because the Wattersons themselves, just by existing the way they do, teach a lesson about love that is worth a chapter of its own. Because this is not an aspirational family. They are not wealthy or successful or well-behaved. The father, Richard, is by any practical measure a failure, lazy, childish, incapable of holding a job or solving a problem. A grown man with the emotional maturity of a small boy who contributes almost nothing to the running of the household. The mother, Nicole, is stretched to her breaking point, working too hard, carrying too much, perpetually one inconvenience away from snapping. The kids are chaos engines who make everything worse. By the standards we usually apply to families, the standards of competence and success in having it together, the Wattersons are a disaster. And they love each other completely, and they are in the ways that actually matter. One of the happiest families on television. And that contradiction is the lesson, because it quietly demolishes the idea that love has to be earned through competence, that you have to have it together to deserve a happy family, that the path to a loving home runs through success and money, and being impressive. Richard is useless, and Richard is beloved, deeply, by a wife and children who see underneath the uselessness a man of genuine gentleness and bottomless affection. A father who may not be able to do anything, but who would do anything, who loves his family with a pure, uncomplicated devotion that more than makes up for everything he cannot provide. The show is making a genuinely radical argument that the worth of a family member is not measured in what they provide, that you can be a failure by every external standard and still be a wonderful father, that love is not a reward for competence but a thing freely given to the imperfect. And that a family held together by love rather than success is not a lesser family, but quite possibly a richer one. And the show is honest about the cost of that too, especially through Nicole, because a family of lovable failures only works if someone carries the weight. And Nicole carries it, and the show does not pretend that is free. It shows her exhaustion, her resentment, the way the burden of being the only responsible one in a house full of children, including the one she married, grinds her down. And in this, it teaches a quieter, harder lesson about love, which is that love is not only the warm feeling, but also the daily labor, the showing up, the carrying of the weight, and that the people who carry the weight need to be seen and thanked and helped, that you cannot simply let one person be the family's foundation forever without it cracking them. The show loves Nicole too much to let her sacrifice be invisible, and in making her exhaustion visible, it teaches the family and the audience to value the labor of the ones who hold everything together, the mothers and the caretakers whose love takes the form of relentless, unglamorous work. Love is gentle, the show says, and love is also hard labor, and a healthy family honors both. The show is just as wise and far funnier about the world outside the family, about the strange new modern life we are all trying to navigate. And here, it becomes one of the sharpest satirists on television. Gumball looks unblinkingly at the absurdities of modern existence. The phones that swallow our attention, the consumer culture that tells us to want endlessly, the social media that turns us cruel, and it skewers all of it. There is an episode where the internet itself is a character, personified as a careless, chaotic entity with no concern for the havoc it wreaks on people's lives, capturing perfectly the way the online world can take a single embarrassing moment and make it eternal and inescapable, the way it spreads cruelty without conscience, the way it has become an enormous force in our lives that nobody actually controls. The show looks at the way we live now, glued to our screens, performing for strangers, drowning in things to buy and things to watch. And it asks, through comedy, whether any of it is making us happy. And the lesson it keeps arriving at is a gentle warning, a plea to look up from the screen and back at the people in the room. Because for all its satire of the modern world, the show's actual values are profoundly old-fashioned. Almost defiantly so. It believes in family dinners and playing outside and looking your friend in the eye, in the small analog joys that the digital world is always trying to pull us away from. Its heroes are happiest not when they are online or shopping or performing for an audience, but when they are simply together, being silly, present with each other, in a way the modern world makes harder every year. The lesson is not that technology is evil, the show is too smart for that. It is that the modern world is engineered to pull your attention away from the things that actually make you happy. toward the things that make someone else money, and that living well in such a world requires a deliberate, almost rebellious effort to keep choosing the real over the virtual, the people in the room over the strangers on the screen, the small present joys over the endless distractions designed to consume your one short life. The Wattersons, broke and chaotic and gloriously analog, are happier than almost anyone in their hyper-connected world, and that is not an accident. It is the show telling you where happiness actually lives, and it is not inside your phone. There is a lesson built into the very look of the show, into its famous visual style, and it is one of the most quietly beautiful things about it. Because the defining feature of Gumball, the thing that makes it instantly recognizable, is that every single character is drawn in a completely different style. Gumball and his family are flat hand-drawn cartoons. Other characters are three-dimensional computer models, or puppets, or stop-motion clay, or pixelated video game sprites, or live-action photographs of real objects, or scribbles that look like a child drew them. The town of Elmore is populated by beings who do not even share a reality of representation, who are made of fundamentally different materials, and the show never explains it, never resolves it, never tries to make everyone match. It simply lets them all coexist, the cartoon and the puppet and the photograph and the pixel, living together in the same town, going to the same school, being friends, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. And that is a philosophy rendered as an art style, and the philosophy is acceptance. Because the world of Elmore is a world in which everyone is visibly, radically, irreconcilably different, where no two people are even made of the same stuff, and in which that difference is simply not a problem. Nobody in Elmore is trying to make everyone match. Nobody is troubled that their neighbor is a different kind of thing entirely. The differences are total, and they are also completely fine, a non-issue. Just the texture of a world full of every imaginable kind of being getting along. And in an age that spends so much energy on the question of difference, on who belongs and who does not, on the anxiety of the other, Gumball offers a vision of a community where the most extreme differences imaginable, differences of literal substance and reality, are met not with fear, but with a shrug and a welcome. The lesson is that difference is not a problem to be solved. It is just the way the world is, the way the world has always been, and the only sane response to it is the response of Elmore. To accept that everyone is made of different stuff and to love them anyway. And underneath that lies a broader lesson about imperfection and chaos itself, because the show never tries to tidy up its world, never smooths the chaos into order, never apologizes for the mess. Elmore is gloriously, permanently chaotic, a place where the rules change constantly, where anything can happen, where nothing quite makes sense, and the show treats that chaos not as a flaw to be fixed, but as the very texture of life, even as something to be celebrated. It refuses the fantasy of the tidy life, the controlled life, the life where everything matches and makes sense and stays in its place. It knows that real life is not like that real life is messy and inconsistent and full of things that do not fit. And instead of mourning that or trying to fix it, the show embraces it, finds the comedy and the beauty in the mess, builds its whole joyful world out of the refusal to be tidy. The lesson is one that anxious, controlling, perfectionist people most need to hear, that the mess is not a failure, that life is supposed to be chaotic and imperfect and inconsistent, and that the secret to enjoying it is not to conquer the chaos but to dance with it, the way the show does. Gleefully, for 6 seasons, there is a more melancholy lesson the show returns to as well, woven through its comedy, and it is about time, about change, about the way nothing stays. Because for all its chaos, Gumball is quietly obsessed with impermanence, with the fact that childhood ends, that things change, that the specific configuration of a life, this family, this age, this moment, is always slipping away even as you live inside it. The show is set in that golden, doomed era of childhood, and underneath the jokes it knows that the era is doomed, that Gumball and Darwin will not be children forever, that the endless summer of being 12 years old with your best friend is in fact ending with every episode. And occasionally the show lets that knowledge surface, lets a moment of genuine wistfulness break through the chaos, an awareness that all of this is temporary, that it is passing, that one day these characters and the children watching them will look back on this as a lost golden time. And the lesson there is the oldest and the hardest one, the one every wisdom tradition circles, which is impermanence. The truth that everything changes and nothing lasts, and the only thing you can do about it is to be present for the good while it is here. The show does not offer a way to stop time or to keep childhood forever. There is no way. What it offers instead is the gentle instruction to notice the good while you are in it, to be present for the golden era while it is still golden, because it is passing, because it is always passing, because the only moment you ever actually have is this one slipping away as you hold it. The Wattersons are in the middle of their golden time and mostly do not know it, the way we are all in the middle of our golden times mostly without knowing it. And the show, with its strange double vision of chaos and wistfulness, is quietly teaching you to know it, to look around at your own loud, imperfect present and recognize, while you are still in it, that this, right now, is the good old days you will one day miss. Gumball himself, the hero, teaches a lesson mostly by being a cautionary tale, because his defining flaw drives the engine of the entire show, and it is a flaw almost everyone shares. Gumball cannot face a small problem honestly. Confronted with a minor mistake, a little embarrassment, a small bit of trouble, his instinct is never to simply own it and deal with it. It is to scheme, to lie, to cover it up, to construct some elaborate plan to make the problem go away, without having to admit it. And that scheme, every single time, makes everything catastrophically worse. The structure of a typical Gumball episode is exactly this. A small, manageable problem appears. Gumball, instead of handling it honestly, tries to dodge it with a lie or a scheme. The scheme backfires, creating a bigger problem. He schemes again to fix that one, and the whole thing spirals, escalating from a tiny issue into a town-threatening apocalypse. All because a boy could not bring himself to simply tell the truth and face a small consequence at the start. And the lesson in that, repeated across hundreds of episodes, is one of the most practical pieces of wisdom the show offers, which is that avoidance is the thing that turns small problems into large ones. The original problem is almost never the disaster. The disaster is the avoidance, the lying, the scheming, the enormous escalating effort to not face a thing that, faced directly and early, would have been small and survivable. Gumball's catastrophes are almost always self-inflicted, the consequence not of the initial mistake, but of his refusal to honestly own it. And in this, he is a mirror for all of us. For the universal human tendency to make our problems infinitely worse by trying to hide them, to let a small lie grow into a large one, to spend 10 times the energy avoiding a hard conversation than the conversation would ever have cost. The lesson is simple, and it is one we have to relearn constantly. Face the small thing now. Own the mistake while it is small. The honest, uncomfortable, immediate truth is almost always cheaper than the elaborate avoidance, and the disaster is almost never the problem itself, but everything we do to avoid admitting it. The show is wiser still about love, and its central romance between Gumball and a girl named Penny contains one of its most beautiful lessons about what it actually takes to love someone. For a long time, Penny exists inside a shell, literally a hard protective casing. And that shell turns out to be the whole point, because in one of the show's most moving episodes, Penny finally breaks out of her shell, cracks it open, and steps out of it, and what is revealed underneath is not a fixed, finished, pretty thing. It is something raw and shifting and vulnerable, a being who can change shape with her emotions, who is, without the shell, utterly exposed, her every feeling visible, her true self with no protection at all between it and the world. The shell was armor. It kept her safe, kept her contained, kept the soft, true self hidden where it could not be hurt. And stepping out of it is terrifying, because it means being truly seen, with nothing to hide behind, in all her raw, shifting vulnerability. And the lesson is about what love actually requires, which is exactly that, the breaking of the shell. Because real intimacy, real love, is not loving the protected version of someone, the armored public self they show the world. It is being allowed past the armor, being trusted to see the soft, true self underneath, the raw and shifting and vulnerable thing the shell exists to protect. And it requires, terrifyingly, dropping your own shell too, letting yourself be seen the same way, with no armor, no protection, fully exposed. Penny breaking out of her shell for Gumball is the show's image of what it means to truly let someone love you, to stop performing the safe, protected version of yourself and risk showing the real one, the vulnerable one, the one that can be hurt. And the reason it works, the reason it is a love story and not a tragedy, is that Gumball, seeing her true, exposed, shifting self, all of it, does not recoil. He accepts her, every form, every raw feeling, the whole vulnerable truth of her. And in being accepted like that, fully seen and not rejected, Penny is freed. That is the lesson about love, the hardest and most necessary one. Love is not safe. Love requires dropping the shell, being truly seen, risking the rejection that real exposure makes possible. And it is worth the risk, because the alternative, staying forever in the shell, safe and armored and never truly known, is its own kind of loneliness, the loneliness of being protected and unseen. To be loved, really loved, you have to let yourself be seen, and that means breaking the shell. And the show makes that terror and that reward as real as anything it ever did. The show is unusually clear-eyed about one of the quiet poisons of modern life, which is comparison, the endless measuring of yourself against everyone around you. And Gumball, the character, is a wonderful study in how that poison works. Because Gumball is forever comparing himself to others, forever wanting what someone else has, forever convinced that his own life would be good if only it were more like someone else's. He envies the rich kid, the cool kid, the kid who has the thing he does not. He measures his own worth against the people around him, and always, somehow, comes up short. Because that is what comparison does. It always finds someone ahead of you to feel behind. And the show shows again and again that this comparing is the source of much of his misery, that he is often perfectly fine until he looks sideways at someone who has more, and that the looking sideways is the thing that ruins it. That turns a good enough life into a disappointing one purely through the act of measuring it against someone else's. And the lesson the show keeps teaching, gently through Gumball's repeated failures to learn it, is that comparison is the thief of joy. That the habit of measuring your life against other people's is a guaranteed path to misery because there is no end to it. There is always someone with more. And the comparing never delivers the satisfaction it promises. Only the endless ache of feeling behind. Gumball is happiest in the moments when he stops comparing, when he is simply present in his own life with his own family and his own friends, not measuring, not wanting what someone else has, just inhabiting the specific good of his own specific life. And he is most miserable the moment he starts to measure. The lesson, drawn out, is that your worth and your happiness are not relative quantities, not things to be calculated by comparison to others. That the rich kid's wealth takes nothing from you and adds nothing to you. That the only life you can actually live is your own, and the only sane way to live it is on its own terms, not as a competition with everyone else's. The show watches Gumball poison his own contentment with comparison 100 times, and each time it is quietly pleading with the audience to do the thing he cannot, to stop looking sideways, to stop measuring, to simply live the life that is yours. And against all of his flaws, his scheming and his envy and his insecurity, stands the thing that redeems Gumball and teaches the show's purest lesson, which is his friendship with Darwin. Because the relationship between Gumball and Darwin is the heart of the entire show, and it is one of the most beautiful depictions of friendship ever animated. Darwin, remember, began as the family pet, a goldfish, who one day simply grew legs and became a person and was welcomed without question as a brother. And the love between Gumball and Darwin is total, uncomplicated, unconditional. Darwin is loyal to Gumball beyond all reason, sticks by him through every terrible scheme and every disaster, believes in him when no one else does, forgives him endlessly, loves him without condition or limit. And Gumball, for all his flaws, loves Darwin back just as completely, would do anything for him, is at his best, his bravest and kindest and most selfless, precisely when Darwin needs him. And the lesson in that friendship is about what the real thing actually looks like, stripped of everything inessential. Darwin is not Gumball's friend because Gumball is impressive, or successful, or even particularly good, because Gumball is none of those things. Darwin is his friend because they love each other simply, completely, for no reason and every reason, the way the best friendships are not transactions or alliances, but just two souls who chose each other and keep choosing each other. And there is something profound in the fact that Darwin started as a pet, as property, and became a brother, because it says that family and friendship are not only things you are born into, but things that are made, earned, chosen, that a creature who began as a fish in a bowl can become, through nothing but love, as essential to a family as any blood relative. The lesson is that the deepest bonds are chosen ones, that love makes family. That loyalty given freely and returned faithfully is one of the most valuable things a life can contain, and that you do not need to be impressive to be loved like that. You only need to find the person who chooses you and to choose them back. Every day. Through every disaster, the way a goldfish who grew legs chose a flawed blue cat and never once stopped being on his side. In a show full of chaos, that steady, unconditional friendship is the still center, and it is quietly teaching every child watching what to look for and what to be in a friend. The show is sharp, too, about the workings of fear and anxiety, about the way the mind can become its own worst enemy. And Gumball is once again the perfect demonstration, because so many of his disasters begin not with a real threat, but with an imagined one. He is an expert catastrophizer, a boy whose imagination runs instantly to the worst possible outcome, who can take a minor worry and inflate it, in seconds, into a vivid, full-color apocalypse playing out behind his eyes. And the show loves to visualize this, to actually show you the elaborate doom spiral unfolding in his mind. The the small concern ballooning into total catastrophe. And then to cut back to reality where nothing has actually happened yet, where the threat was entirely manufactured by his own racing thoughts. And it is funny, and it is also one of the most accurate depictions of anxiety you will find anywhere. The way the anxious mind generates threats that do not exist, suffers disasters that never happen, lives in dread of futures its own imagination invented. And the lesson there is gentle and important, especially for the anxious among us, which is that most of what we fear never happens, that the suffering of anxiety is largely the suffering of imagined catastrophes, that the mind, left unchecked, will manufacture far more pain than the world ever actually delivers. Gumball's imagined disasters are almost always worse than his real ones, and the energy he spends dreading them is almost always wasted, spent on futures that never arrive. The show does not pretend that real problems do not exist, but it shows again and again the gap between the catastrophe we imagine and the manageable thing that actually shows up. And it quietly suggests that a great deal of human misery lives in that gap, in the space between the threats we fear and the smaller realities that come. Courage, the show implies, is not the absence of that fear, but the willingness to act through it, to do the thing despite the imagined doom, to discover, as Gumball discovers over and over, that the catastrophe his mind promised almost never comes, and that the only way to find that out is to move forward anyway. The show reaches its deepest moral wisdom, though, in how it treats its villains. And the clearest case is a character named Rob, because what the show does with him is a masterclass in empathy. Rob begins as a forgotten character, a background figure no one paid attention to. And at one point, he falls into that terrible void we talked about, the place where the forgotten and the erased go. And he comes back from it changed, broken, bitter, his face and his life damaged by the experience, and he becomes Gumball's nemesis, the closest thing the show has to a recurring villain. And it would be easy and lazy to leave him there as a simple bad guy for the hero to defeat. But the show does not. It shows you why Rob became what he became. It shows you that his villainy is born from genuine pain, from the agony of being forgotten, from the specific wound of having been a person no one noticed, and then being literally erased and coming back to find that no one had even registered his absence. Rob is a villain because he was hurt, because he was forgotten, because the indifference of the world curdled inside him into resentment. And the show makes you understand that, makes you feel the pain underneath the villainy. And the lesson there is one of the most mature things a children's show can teach, which is that cruelty almost always comes from pain, that the people who hurt others are very often people who were hurt themselves, that behind most villainy is a wound, and that understanding this is not the same as excusing it, but is the only path to actually addressing it. Rob is not evil for no reason. He is in pain, and his pain became cruelty the way pain so often does. And the show asks you to see that, to extend your understanding even to the antagonist, to recognize that the line between the hero and the villain is often just the line between the boy who was loved and remembered and the boy who was forgotten and erased. It is a profound act of empathy to humanize your villain like that, to insist that even the bad guy has a story, that even cruelty has a cause that deserves understanding. And it teaches the audience something they will need their whole lives, which is that the people who treat you badly are usually fighting battles you cannot see, carrying wounds you do not know about, and that while this does not excuse the harm they do, it can transform your response to it from simple hatred into something wiser and more compassionate. The recognition that hurt people, and that understanding the hurt is the only thing that ever actually breaks the cycle. If there is one thing the Wattersons are truly world-class at, it is failing, and the show's relationship to failure is its own quiet lesson. Maybe the most freeing one of all, because these characters fail constantly. Gumball's schemes fail. Richard fails at every job, every task, every responsibility. Nicole's heroic efforts are forever undone by the chaos around her. The family lurches from disaster to disaster, almost never actually succeeding at anything. And here is the remarkable part, the part that is secretly wise. They do not let it crush them. They fail, and they feel bad for a moment, and then they get up and try the next ridiculous thing. And the failures, enormous and constant as they are, never quite manage to defeat their fundamental joy. Richard, in particular, is a man who has failed at essentially everything a person can fail at, and he remains one of the most cheerful, contented characters on television. A champion failure who somehow never got the message that all that failure was supposed to make him miserable. And there is a genuine lesson in that, especially for a culture as terrified of failure as ours. Because we are taught to dread failure, to see it as a verdict, a permanent mark, evidence of our inadequacy, and that dread keeps so many people from ever trying anything at all, frozen by the fear of failing at it. The Wattersons have no such fear, or rather, they fail so constantly and so spectacularly that failure has lost all its power over them. become just a normal part of life, a thing that happens on the way to the next thing, nothing to be ashamed of, and nothing to be destroyed by. And they are happier for it, freer, more willing to try, more able to enjoy their lives, precisely because they have stopped treating failure as a catastrophe. The lesson is that failure is not the opposite of a good life, that you can fail constantly and still be happy, that the people who never fail are usually just the people who never tried anything, and that a life of cheerful, resilient, repeated failure, getting up every time and trying the next ridiculous thing, is not only survivable, but can be genuinely joyful. The Wattersons fail their way through 6 seasons and remain delighted to be alive, and that is not a joke. It is a model. Underneath that lies the show's celebration of something it values above almost everything, which is authenticity, the simple act of being unapologetically yourself. Because Elmore is a town full of the strangest, most specific, most unapologetic individuals imaginable. Characters who are bizarrely, completely themselves, with no apology and no self-consciousness whatsoever. Nobody in Elmore is trying to be normal, because there is no normal, because everyone is so completely their own strange specific self that the very idea of conforming has no meaning. The town is a riot of individuality, every character a singular weirdo living out their singular weird existence, and the show celebrates this, delights in it, presents the relentless specific weirdness of its citizens not as a problem, but as the whole joy of the place. There is no pressure in Elmore to be like everyone else, because everyone else is so utterly different that there is no everyone else to be like. And the lesson for a world that puts enormous pressure on people to conform, to fit in, to smooth down their strange edges and be normal is a permission, a liberation. Be yourself. Be your strange, specific, weird self, the show says, because that is the only interesting thing you can be, because the pressure to be normal is a pressure to erase exactly the things that make you you. The characters of Gumball are beloved precisely for their weirdness, for the specific strange particular things that make each of them unmistakably themselves. And the show is quietly teaching every child watching that their own weirdness, the specific strange things about them that they might be tempted to hide, are not flaws to be corrected, but the very source of their value, the things that make them interesting and lovable and real. Do not sand yourself down to fit in, the show says. Do not trade your strange, specific self for a smooth normal. What it needs, what it loves, what it remembers, is the weirdos who had the courage to be exactly, unapologetically, gloriously themselves. Elmore is a town of such weirdos, and it is the most alive place on television, and that is not a coincidence. The aliveness comes from the authenticity. The joy comes from everyone being brave enough to be exactly who they are. There is a lesson that lives most purely in Darwin, and it is about gratitude, about the simple, radical practice of being amazed and thankful to be alive at all. Because remember what Darwin is. He was a goldfish. He lived in a bowl, a small glass world, a pet, a thing, with the tiny, circumscribed existence of a fish. And then, impossibly, he grew legs and became a person, gained a family, a brother, a whole life he was never supposed to have. And Darwin never forgets this. He moves through the world in a state of more or less perpetual wonder and gratitude, delighted by things the others take for granted, thankful simply to have legs, to have a family, to be a person at all, to be alive in a world he was never meant to experience. He is the most grateful character in the show, and he is also, not coincidentally, the happiest and the kindest. Because gratitude and happiness and kindness turn out to be the same thing wearing different faces. And the lesson there is one of the oldest and most reliable secrets of a good life, which is gratitude, the deliberate practice of noticing and being thankful for what you have rather than aching for what you do not. Darwin is happy not because his life is better than everyone else's. It is not. He is the family pet who got promoted with no money and no status and no special gifts. He is happy because he never stopped being amazed at having a life at all, because he treats his ordinary existence as the miracle it actually is, because he wakes up every day grateful to have legs and a family, and a single day to be alive. And that is available to everyone, that exact orientation, the choice to notice the staggering improbability of your own existence, to be amazed that you are here at all, to treat your ordinary life not as a disappointment measured against some imagined better one, but as the astonishing gift it is, the chance to be conscious and alive and loved in a universe that did not have to contain you. Darwin the goldfish, grateful for his legs, is quietly teaching the whole audience the single most reliable path to happiness there is, which is to want what you have, to notice it, to be amazed by it, to say thank you for the miracle of an ordinary day. And when you lay all of these lessons out together, the money and the choices and the meaning of life, The mattering and the family and the modern world, the chaos and the impermanence, the honesty and the love and the comparison, the friendship and the failure and the authenticity and the gratitude, something remarkable happens. Because they do not contradict each other. They add up. They cohere into a single, surprisingly complete philosophy of how to live, smuggled into a chaotic children's cartoon, one episode at a time. And the philosophy goes something like this. Life is chaotic and imperfect. And that is not a problem to be fixed, but the very texture of being alive, to be embraced rather than resisted. Happiness does not come from money or success or being remarkable or having more than other people. It comes from love, from family, from presence, from gratitude, from being your strange specific self and letting yourself be truly seen, and choosing again and again to love the imperfect life you actually have. Everyone matters no matter how ordinary or forgettable. Everyone is different, and that is beautiful. Be honest, because the people who hurt you are usually hurting. Cherish the present, because it is passing, and want what you have, because it is all of it, an astonishing gift. That is a genuine, coherent, livable philosophy, and it is a good one, maybe a better and more honest one than many serious works of philosophy ever arrive at. And the show delivers it not in lectures, but in laughter, hidden inside the chaos, slipped past the defenses of an audience that thought it was just watching a silly cartoon about a blue cat. And that is the final and largest lesson, the one about the show itself, which is that wisdom does not have to be solemn. The chaos was never the opposite of the wisdom. The chaos was the delivery system, the spoonful of sugar, the disarming, silly surface that let the show say profound things without ever sounding like it was trying to, that let it teach a generation of children about the meaning of life and the fear of being forgotten, and the secret of contentment while they thought they were just laughing at a goldfish with legs. The greatest trick the show ever pulled was to be this wise while looking this silly, to hide a complete philosophy of living inside the most chaotic comedy on television, and to trust that the lessons would sink in sideways, absorbed through laughter, lodging quietly in the hearts of children who would not understand what they had been given until years later, lying awake some night as adults, remembering a cartoon cat and his goldfish brother and suddenly understanding that it had been telling them how to live all along. There is one more lesson worth drawing out before we begin to drift toward sleep, and it is about parents, about the moment a child realizes that the people who raised them are people, full and flawed and frightened humans with their own inner lives, rather than just the fixed roles of mom and dad. The show returns to this more than once, peeling back the parental masks of Nicole and Richard to show the actual people underneath, the histories that shaped them, the wounds they carry, the children they once were. We learn that Nicole was raised by cold, demanding parents who valued achievement over affection, and that her workaholism and her hardness are, in part, the inheritance of that upbringing. A daughter who learned that love had to be earned through performance, and never quite unlearned it. We learn that Richard's uselessness has its own origins, its own sad story, that he is not simply lazy, but shaped, formed, the product of his own history the way everyone is. And the lesson there is one that usually arrives late in life, often too late, which is that your parents were people. Whole people with their own fears and disappointments and unhealed childhood wounds, doing their best with the broken tools their own parents handed them, improvising their way through the impossible job of raising you while still, themselves, half-raised, half-formed, carrying their own damage. The show invites its young audience to see Nicole and Richard not just as parents, but as people. And in doing so, it plants a seed that will bloom years later. The understanding that the adults who raised you were not the all-knowing authorities they appeared to be, but frightened, improvising humans, as lost as anyone, loving you imperfectly through their own imperfection. And that understanding, when it finally comes, is one of the great doorways to compassion. The moment you stop judging your parents by the standard of the perfect parents you wished for, and start seeing them as the limited, struggling, doing their best people they actually were, which is the beginning of forgiving them, and of understanding that you too are just a limited, struggling person doing your best, and deserve the same compassion you are learning to extend to them. So as we begin to let the night go soft, let me gather these lessons up and hand them to you, not as a lecture but as a gift, the way the show handed them to a generation of children who did not know they were receiving them. You do not need money to be happy, only love and the wisdom to know the difference. You can choose to love the life you actually chose rather than mourning the lives you did not. The meaning of life is not a riddle to be solved, but a life to be lived. You matter, no matter how ordinary you feel. Family does not have to be perfect to be everything. Look up from the screen at the people in the room. Embrace the mess. Cherish the present, because it is passing. Face the hard thing honestly while it is small. Drop your shell and let yourself be seen. Stop comparing. Choose your friends and choose them again. Fail without fear. Be your strange, specific self. Be kind because everyone is hurting. Be grateful because all of it is a gift. And see the people who raised you as people and forgive them. And forgive yourself. That is a lot of wisdom to find in a show about a blue cat and his goldfish brother. And I think the fact that it is all there, genuinely there, woven through 6 seasons of chaos, is the best argument I know for taking children's animation seriously. For believing that the things we absorb when we are young, dressed in color and comedy, can be among the most important things we ever learn. The children who grew up with Gumball were being taught how to live gently, sideways, through laughter. And many of them are only realizing it now, as adults, returning to the show and finding underneath the chaos they remembered, a depth they were too young to see the first time. That is the gift of the best children's stories, that they grow with you, that they meet you as a laughing child and wait patiently to meet you again as a searching adult, with everything they were always trying to tell you still there, still true, ready to be understood at last. A few more lessons deserve a quiet mention before we drift, because the show is generous with them, tucking wisdom into corners you would never expect. There is, for one, a lesson about conflict, about fighting with the people you love and finding your way back, because the Wattersons fight. They argue, they snap at each other, they have real conflicts, and even Gumball and Darwin, the show's perfect friendship, occasionally fall out, hurt each other, reach a genuine breaking point. And the show never pretends that loving people means never fighting with them. What it shows instead is something more useful, which is that conflict is survivable, that you can fight with the people you love and come back together, that an argument is not the end of a relationship but a normal part of it, and that the real skill is not avoiding conflict but repairing it, finding your way back to each other after the storm. The fights are real and so is the reconciliation, every time, and the lesson is that love is not the absence of conflict, but the commitment to keep repairing it, to keep coming back, to let no fight be the final word. There is a lesson, too, in how the children of the show entertain themselves, because they are forever making something out of nothing, turning a boring afternoon into an epic adventure through sheer imagination. Gumball and Darwin can transform an empty box, a dull errand, a rainy day with nothing to do, into the greatest adventure of their lives, purely through the power of pretending, of imagination, of deciding that the ordinary world is actually full of wonder if you look at it right. And in an age where children and adults are handed endless prefabricated entertainment, where boredom is something to be instantly banished with a screen, there is a quiet lesson in the way these kids make their own fun, generate their own wonder, prove that you do not need things to be entertained. That imagination is the one inexhaustible resource. That a bored child with nothing but their own mind is richer than a child drowning in toys. The capacity to be delighted by nothing, to make an adventure out of an empty afternoon, is a kind of wealth that no amount of money can buy and no screen can replace, and the show celebrates it on every page. And running through all of it, holding the whole chaotic enterprise together, is Gumball's relentless optimism, which is its own lesson and maybe the foundational one. Because Gumball, for all his schemes and his failures and his disasters, is fundamentally an optimist. A boy who keeps believing that things will work out, that the next plan will succeed, that the world is, despite all evidence, basically on his side. And yes, his optimism is often naive, often the very thing that gets him into trouble. But it is also the thing that keeps him going, that lets him bounce back from every failure, that makes his life an adventure rather than a series of defeats. The show gently suggests that optimism, even naive optimism, is a kind of strength, that facing a chaotic and difficult world with hope rather than despair is not foolishness but courage, that the choice to believe things might work out, even when they often do not, is what makes it possible to keep trying, keep living, keep throwing yourself at the next ridiculous scheme. Optimism, the show says, is not a belief about how the world is. It is a way of facing the world, a choice, a stance. And it is the stance that makes a good life possible. And maybe that is why a show this chaotic is, in the end, so strangely soothing to spend a quiet night with. Why these lessons settle you rather than stir you up. Because underneath all the noise and the chaos and the comedy, Gumball is a fundamentally hopeful, fundamentally kind, fundamentally wise show. One that looks at the difficulty of being alive, the money worries and the existential fears and the messiness of family and the cruelty of the world, and responds to all of it not with despair but with love, with humor, with gratitude, with the gentle insistence that life, chaotic and imperfect and hard as it is good, is worth it, is a gift. To drift off inside that is to drift off inside a worldview that wants you to be okay, that is rooting for you, that has looked at everything hard about being a person and concluded, anyway, that you should be kind and grateful and present and brave, and that you should love your messy life. There are worse things to fall asleep believing. There are few better ones. The show has a great deal to say about anger, mostly through Nicole, because underneath her competence and her care is a temper, a genuine fury that the show treats as one of her defining and most dangerous traits. When Nicole loses control of her anger, it is genuinely frightening, a destructive force that can level everything around her, and the show does not glamorize it. It shows the damage that uncontrolled rage does, the way it frightens the people she loves, the way it solves nothing and breaks much, the way her anger, however justified its origins, becomes its own problem the moment it takes the wheel. And it connects her anger thoughtfully to her history, to the pressure she carries, to the exhaustion of holding everything together, so that you understand the rage without ever being asked to approve of it. And the lesson there is a careful one about anger, which is that anger is not wrong to feel, but dangerous to obey. Nicole's frustrations are real, her grievances often legitimate, the pressures on her genuinely unfair. The anger makes sense, but the show is clear that making sense is not the same as being safe to act on, that even justified anger, when it takes control, becomes a destroyer that harms the very people the angry person loves. The work, the show suggests, is not to never feel anger, which is impossible, but to not let it drive, to feel the fury and still choose not to unleash it, to find a way to honor the legitimate grievance underneath the rage, without letting the rage itself do the damage it always wants to do. Nicole struggles with this her whole life, and her struggle is honest. And it teaches the audience that the management of one's own anger is one of the central labors of being a person, especially a person responsible for others, and that losing that struggle, letting the anger win, costs you the very thing the anger was trying to protect. The show is wise, too, about institutions, about school in particular, because so much of it takes place at Elmore Junior High, a school that is, frankly, a nightmare, presided over by an ancient hostile teacher and a useless administration, a place of arbitrary cruelty and pointless rules and casual indignity. And the show is honest about this in a way that resonates deeply with anyone who actually remembers school, refusing the sanitized version where school is a wholesome place of learning and friendship, showing instead the absurdity of it. The boredom, the petty tyrannies, the way institutions can grind down the individuals trapped inside them. Gumball and Darwin survive Elmore Junior High not by succeeding within its terms, but by holding on to themselves despite it, by refusing to let the institution define them or crush their spirits, by treating its absurdities as the absurdities they are. And the lesson there is quietly subversive and genuinely useful, which is that institutions are not the measure of your worth, that you can be failed by a school, a system, an institution, and still be fine, still be valuable, still be yourself. The school does not recognize what is good in Gumball and Darwin, does not reward it, often actively punishes it, and the show makes clear that this is the school's failure, not theirs. It teaches its young audience, many of whom are themselves trapped in institutions that do not see them, that the judgment of a flawed system is not the truth about you, that being failed by school does not mean you are a failure, that you can survive the institutions that do not value you by holding on to your own sense of who you are until you are free of them. That is a lesson a great many people need, and few children's shows are honest enough to teach. The permission to survive a system that does not see your worth without believing its verdict on you. Underneath that lies a deeper lesson about identity, about the difference between who you are and what others say you are. Because the characters of the show are constantly being labeled, sorted, defined by others. The school telling them what they are, their peers assigning them roles, the world pressing its categories onto them. And the show consistently sides with the inner truth over the external label, with who a character actually is over who the world has decided they are. It knows that the world is forever trying to tell you what you are, to fit you into a box, to define you from the outside, and it knows that the only sane response is to hold on to your own sense of yourself, to know who you are well enough that the world's labels cannot stick, cannot define you, cannot tell you who to be. You are not what the school says you are, not what the label says, not what the box says. You are who you actually are on the inside. And the lifelong work is to know that self well enough and hold on to it firmly enough that no external verdict can take it from you. The show returns more than once to the difference between generosity and selfishness, usually by letting Gumball be selfish and then showing him the cost of it. Because Gumball, like most of us, has a selfish streak, a tendency to grab what he wants, to put himself first, to hoard the good things rather than share them. And the show patiently demonstrates, again and again, that this never actually makes him happier. The selfish grab leaves him emptier, more isolated, less content, while the moments where he gives, shares, puts someone else first, are the moments where he finds the deeper satisfaction that selfishness always promises and never delivers. It is an old lesson, but the show makes it freshly true. The discovery that generosity is not a sacrifice that costs you happiness, but a strange kind of investment that returns it. That the most reliable way to feel good is, counterintuitively, to make someone else feel good. And that the hoarder, clutching everything for himself, ends up poorer than the giver who let it go. There is a lesson, too, about words, about the strange, enormous power of the things we say. And the show takes it seriously because it knows how much damage words can do. It tackles cyberbullying directly, shows the way cruel words spread and wound and linger, the way a thing said carelessly can take on a life of its own and hurt someone long after the speaker has forgotten saying it. And it shows the other side too. The way a kind word at the right moment can save someone, can change a day or a life, can be the small thing that pulls a person back from the edge of despair. Words are not nothing, the show insists, against a culture that often treats them as cheap. Words build people up and tear them down. Words are remembered for decades. Words can be the kindest or the cruelest thing you ever give another person. And the lesson is to wield them with the care they deserve, to understand that what you say to people becomes part of them, and to choose, knowing that, to be a person whose words heal rather than wound. And through Nicole, the show teaches one of the hardest lessons for the hardworking and the responsible, which is the lesson about rest, about the cost of burning yourself out, about the necessity of caring for yourself and not only for everyone else. Because Nicole works herself to the edge of collapse, pours every ounce of herself into her job and her family until there is nothing left for her own self, and the show does not present this as admirable. It presents it as a problem, a slow self-destruction, a martyrdom that helps no one in the end, because a person who has burned themselves completely out has nothing left to give. The lesson is that you cannot pour endlessly from an empty cup. That taking care of yourself is not selfish but necessary. That the responsible person who never rests, never plays, never tends to their own needs, is on a path to a breakdown that will hurt everyone who depends on them. Rest is not laziness. Self-care is not selfishness. And the person carrying everyone else has to be carried too, has to carry themselves too, or the whole thing collapses. Nicole learns this the hard way, over and over, and her struggle is a gift to every exhausted caretaker watching. The permission, rarely granted, to rest. There is courage in the show, too, a particular kind, the everyday courage of small acts rather than grand heroics. The characters are not warriors. Their bravery is the ordinary bravery of admitting a mistake, of apologizing, of trying again after failing, of being honest when a lie would be easier, of standing up for a friend, of facing an embarrassing truth, and the show quietly insists that this ordinary courage is real courage, that the small brave acts of an ordinary life, the hard conversation, the owned mistake, the apology offered, the truth told, require as much bravery as any battle and matter more to the actual texture of a life. We tend to think of courage as something for emergencies, for heroes, for dramatic moments. The show relocates it to the everyday, to the small daily acts of honesty and vulnerability and trying again. And in doing so, it makes courage available to everyone, every day, in the small brave choices that no one will ever celebrate, but that quietly make a person good. And underneath the courage is forgiveness, which the show practices relentlessly because the Wattersons wrong each other constantly and forgive each other constantly, and the forgiveness is what lets the family survive its own chaos. They hurt each other, and they forgive, and they hurt each other again, and they forgive again, in an endless cycle that is not a sign of dysfunction but the very thing that holds them together. Because a family that could not forgive would have shattered under the weight of its own mistakes long ago. The lesson is that forgiveness is not a single grand act, but a daily practice, a thing you do over and over, the constant releasing of the small grievances and the large ones that would otherwise accumulate into walls between people. You will be wronged by the people you love, the show knows, and you will wrong them constantly because that is what living closely with other imperfect people means. And the only way through is forgiveness, given and received again and again. The daily decision to let it go and stay together rather than hold on and drift apart. The youngest Watterson, Anais, carries a lesson of her own, the lesson of being underestimated, because Anais is a small child, a toddler really, and she is also the smartest member of the family by a wide margin. More rational, more capable, more clear-sighted than any of the adults or older children around her. And she spends her life being underestimated, dismissed because of her size and her age, her intelligence overlooked because she does not look like someone who should have it. Forced to watch the people around her make foolish mistakes she could easily have prevented if anyone had only listened to her. And the show treats this with real sympathy, the particular frustration of being more capable than the world will acknowledge, of being trapped behind other people's assumptions about what someone like you can be. And the lesson cuts in two directions, both of them useful. For anyone who has been underestimated, dismissed because of their age or their appearance or their background, or any of the 1,000 things that make the world decide in advance what you are capable of, Anais is a small, fierce vindication, proof that the world's assumptions are often wrong. That capability comes in unexpected packages. That being underestimated says more about the people doing the underestimating than about you. And for everyone else, Anais is a quiet warning against the assumptions we all make. The way we constantly prejudge people, decide in advance who is smart and who is not, who matters and who does not, based on surfaces that tell us almost nothing. Do not underestimate people, the show says, because the smartest person in the room is sometimes the smallest, the most capable, sometimes the most overlooked. And the world is full of dismissed and underestimated people carrying gifts that no one bothered to notice. The show is quietly insistent, too, on the value of presence, of being where you are, of not letting your one actual life slip past while your mind is somewhere else. So many of its lessons circle back to this: the family happiest when they are truly present with each other. The disasters often beginning when someone is distracted, chasing some imagined better elsewhere instead of inhabiting the good enough here. And in a world engineered to scatter our attention to keep us perpetually half present, half here, and half lost in a screen or a worry or a fantasy of elsewhere, the show's gentle insistence on presence is its own quiet rebellion. The only life you ever actually have is the one happening right now, in this moment, in this room, and a life spent perpetually somewhere else, mentally absent from your own existence, is a life half-lived. Be here, the show says, again and again in its chaotic way. Be where you are. This moment, ordinary as it seems, is the only one you actually have, and it is slipping past while you read this, and the whole secret is to be awake for it. And against the cynicism that the modern world cultivates so efficiently, the show holds the line for hope, stubbornly, unfashionably. It would be easy, given everything it knows about the difficulty of life, the money worries and the existential fears and the cruelty and the chaos, for the show to curdle into cynicism, to conclude that it is all pointless, that hope is naive, that the wise response to a hard world is to expect the worst. And it refuses. For all its clear-sighted honesty about how hard things are, the show remains fundamentally hopeful, fundamentally on the side of joy, fundamentally convinced that life is worth it, that love is real, that things can be good, and that hope is not naive because it is not ignorant of the darkness. It has looked directly at the darkness and chosen hope anyway, which is the only kind of hope worth having. In a culture that mistakes cynicism for intelligence and despair for sophistication, the show quietly insists that hope is the braver and the wiser choice. That anyone can be cynical, but it takes real courage to keep believing in joy after you have seen how hard life can be. There is even, underneath everything, a lesson about what we leave behind, about legacy, about the marks we make on the people around us. The show knows that we are all constantly leaving traces in other people, that the way we treat the people in our lives becomes part of them, that we are remembered, that we matter to others in ways we often never see. The Wattersons leave their marks on each other and on their town, the kindnesses and the cruelties alike rippling outward. And the show is quietly aware that this is how a life actually echoes forward, not through fame or wealth or achievement, but through the people we touched and how we touched them. Your legacy, the show suggests, is not what you accomplish, but how you make people feel. The warmth or the wound you leave in the people whose lives cross yours. And that legacy is being written every day, in every interaction, whether you notice it or not. It is a quiet call to tend that legacy with care, to be, in the lives of the people around you, a source of warmth rather than wound, because that, in the end, is the only legacy that lasts. There is a whole philosophy of small joys running through the show, an attentiveness to the tiny ordinary pleasures that make up the actual texture of a happy life. The Wattersons, for all their troubles, are forever finding delight in small things. A good meal, a silly game, a shared joke, a lazy afternoon, the minor pleasures that cost nothing, and that a distracted life lets slip past unnoticed. And the show pays attention to these, lingers on them, treats the small joys as the real substance of happiness rather than as filler between the important things, because it understands something that is easy to forget, which is that a life is not made of its big moments. A life is made of its ordinary days, its small repeated pleasures, the countless tiny good moments that we are usually too busy or too distracted to notice. And the people who are happiest are not the ones who have the most big moments, but the ones who have learned to savor the small ones. The lesson is to slow down enough to taste your own ordinary life, to notice the small good things while they are happening. because they are not filler, they are the thing itself, the actual material of a life well lived. And the show teaches, by example, the deep value of laughter itself, of humor as a way of facing the world. Because for all its wisdom, the show is, first and last, funny, relentlessly, gloriously funny. And that is not separate from its wisdom, but part of it. The Wattersons face a hard life, real hardship and real fear, and they face it laughing. And the laughter is not denial, not a refusal to take things seriously, but a way of staying afloat, of keeping their spirits intact, of refusing to let the difficulty of life rob them of their joy. Humor, the show demonstrates, is one of the great survival tools, a way of holding the hard things at a bearable distance, of finding the absurdity in the difficulty, of laughing not because nothing is wrong, but because laughter is how you survive the things that are. The ability to laugh, especially to laugh at the chaos and the difficulty, and even at yourself, is a kind of resilience, a kind of strength. And the show models it on every page, a family laughing its way through a hard life and being saved, again and again, by its own refusal to stop finding things funny. So let me speak to you directly, gently, as we near the end, because all of these lessons are not really about a cartoon. They are about your life, the one you are living right now, the one you will wake up to in the morning. You too are living a chaotic, imperfect life in a confusing world. You too have money worries and existential fears and a messy family and roads not taken, and people who underestimate you and a temper to manage and a phone pulling at your attention and an anxious mind generating disasters that will never happen. The lessons of this silly show are for you as much as for any child who watched it, and maybe more, because you have lived long enough to understand them. You can choose to love the life you actually have. You can stop comparing. You can be present. You can be grateful. You can drop your shell and let yourself be seen. You can forgive and rest and laugh and be your strange, specific self and notice the small joys and treat the people around you with the warmth you would want to leave behind. None of it requires anything you do not already have. It only requires choosing it, the way Nicole chooses her family, the way Darwin chooses gratitude, the way the whole chaotic family chooses, every day, to love their imperfect life. And the beautiful thing about these lessons is that they are available right now, tonight, in this moment, as you lie here in the dark. You do not have to fix your life first, or wait until things are better, or become a different person to start living by them. You can begin to be grateful right now for the simple fact of being warm and safe and alive at the end of a day. You can begin to be present right now, here, in this quiet moment, with nothing required of you. You can begin to forgive, to let go of some small grievance you have been carrying right now, and feel it lighten. The lessons of Gumball are not distant goals to strive toward. They are choices available in every single moment, including this one, the constant small choices that, made often enough, slowly become a life. And tonight, drifting towards sleep, you can make the gentlest of them, the choice to be grateful for your one chaotic, imperfect, beautiful life, and to rest inside it, held, for now, by the quiet dark. That is what the show would want for you, in the end, more than it would want you to remember any particular lesson. It would want you to be okay. It would want you to love your messy life and the messy people in it, to be gentle with yourself and with them, to laugh at the chaos and be grateful for the gift and present for the small joys, and brave enough to be exactly who you are. It spent 6 seasons of beautiful chaos trying to teach a generation of children how to be happy in a hard world. And the teaching was always, underneath everything, an act of love. A show that cared about the people watching it, that wanted them to be okay, that hid its wisdom and laughter so that it would go down easy and stay forever. And it is still there, still wanting that for you, still rooting for you. A silly show about a blue cat that loved its audience enough to teach them, sideways, through joy, how to live. The show is quietly wise about asking for help, about the truth that you are not meant to carry everything alone. Because the Wattersons, for all their dysfunction, are a unit, a team, a family that survives precisely because they lean on each other, because no one of them is expected to bear the whole weight by themselves. When Nicole tries to carry everything alone, she breaks. When the family pulls together, shares the load, leans on each other, they survive what none of them could survive separately. And in a culture that prizes self-reliance, that treats needing help as a weakness, that tells us we should be able to handle everything ourselves, the show offers a gentler and truer view that interdependence is not weakness but the natural condition of human life. That asking for help is an act of wisdom rather than failure, that we are built to lean on each other, and that the people who try to do it all alone are not strong but simply isolated. You do not have to carry it all yourself, the show says. You were never meant to. Let the people who love you help you carry it, the way the Wattersons carry each other, and the weight that would crush one becomes bearable when it is shared. The show practices, too, a deep empathy across difference, a curiosity about lives unlike your own, because the town of Elmore is full of wildly different beings living wildly different lives, and the show takes an interest in all of them. It gives its minor characters inner lives, lets the background figures have their own struggles and dreams and dignity, refuses to treat anyone, however strange or minor, as mere scenery. And in doing so, it models a kind of attention that the world badly needs. The willingness to imagine your way into lives radically unlike your own. To grant the strangers around you the same inner reality you grant yourself. To be curious about rather than afraid of the people who are different from you. Everyone in Elmore has a story, the show insists. The weird ones and the minor ones and the ones who are made of completely different stuff than you, and the practice of remembering that, of granting full humanity to the people who are not like you, is one of the quiet foundations of a decent life and a decent world. And there is dignity in the show given to ordinary working people, to the unglamorous lives that most stories ignore. Elmore is full of people doing ordinary jobs, struggling with ordinary problems, living the unremarkable lives that make up most of the actual world, and the show treats them with affection and respect, rather than condescension. It does not save its interest for the exceptional. It finds the comedy and the humanity in the ordinary, in the bus driver and the shopkeeper and the tired parent, in all the regular people getting through their regular days. And in doing so, it affirms the dignity and the worth of ordinary life, the kind of life most people actually live. You do not have to be exceptional to matter, the show keeps insisting. In 100 small ways, the ordinary life, the regular job, the unremarkable existence is full of dignity and worth and quiet meaning, and the people living it deserve to be seen, and the show sees them. It is worth marveling, too, at how the show manages to hold all of this, the chaos and the wisdom, the comedy and the depth, without ever collapsing into either pure silliness or heavy-handed preaching. Because that balance is genuinely hard to strike. A show that was only silly would teach nothing. A show that was only wise would be unbearable. A lecture. Gumball threads the needle, stays relentlessly funny while being quietly profound. Never sacrifices the comedy for the lesson or the lesson for the comedy, lets them coexist, lets the wisdom emerge naturally from the chaos rather than interrupting it. That is a remarkable feat of craft, and it is the reason the lessons land, because they never feel like lessons. Never feel like the show stopping to teach you something, but like truths that simply emerge from watching this family live, absorbed almost without noticing, the way the deepest lessons of childhood are always absorbed, sideways, through delight. And that, finally, is the secret of why it works, why a chaotic comedy could become a vessel for genuine wisdom, why a generation absorbed a whole philosophy of living from a show they thought was just making them laugh. It is that the show never stopped trusting its audience, never condescended, never assumed that because it was for children, it had to be simple or shallow or safe. It assumed the opposite, that children could handle real depth, real questions, real wisdom, as long as it came wrapped in enough joy. And it was right. The children who watched Gumball were trusted with the meaning of life and the fear of being forgotten and the secret of contentment, and they received it, quietly, through laughter, and many of them carry it still without quite knowing where they learned it. That trust, that refusal to talk down, that faith that joy and wisdom belong together, is the deepest lesson of all. The one the show teaches not through any episode but through its whole existence. The demonstration that the things that delight us and the things that change us do not have to be separate. That the best teacher is often the one disguised as pure fun. So, as the night settles toward its end, hold on to that, the image of a show that loved its audience enough to make them laugh and grow at the same time, that hid a whole way of living inside a silly cartoon and trusted that it would take root. It did take root. It is rooted in you now if you grew up with it, and even if you did not, you have spent this night letting it root, letting the lessons of a blue cat and his goldfish brother settle into you in the dark. They are good lessons, they are true ones, and they are yours now to carry into tomorrow and all the days after, the quiet wisdom of the most chaotic show ever made, waiting in you, ready whenever you need it. There is a lesson, too, about being kind to yourself, about quieting the harsh inner voice that so many people carry, and the show teaches it mostly by how gently it treats its own flawed characters. Because Gumball is a mess, and Richard is a failure, and Nicole is too hard on herself, and the show loves them all anyway, completely, flaws and all, never asking them to be perfect before it will love them. And there is an implicit instruction in that, a model for how to treat yourself, which is with the same affection the show extends to its imperfect family. So many people carry a brutal inner critic, A voice that catalogs every flaw and failure, that demands perfection and withholds love until it is achieved, that is crueler to them than they would ever be to anyone else. And the show quietly suggests another way, the way it treats its own characters, with patience and humor and unconditional affection, loving them not despite their flaws, but including them. Be as kind to yourself as this silly show is to its silly characters, it seems to say. You do not have to be perfect to deserve your own love. You are allowed to be a flawed work in progress, like everyone, like the whole chaotic family, and to treat yourself anyway with gentleness. The show is quietly radical as well, about bodies, because its characters come in every conceivable shape and size and form, and the show never treats any of them as wrong. There is no ideal body in Elmore, no standard against which the others are found wanting, just an endless variety of forms, large and small and strange and ordinary. All of them simply accepted as the way that particular person is. In a culture saturated with impossible standards, with constant pressure to look a certain way, with the relentless message that your body is a problem to be fixed, the show offers a town where bodies are just bodies, where no one is shamed for their shape, where the enormous variety of forms is simply the normal texture of a world full of different beings. It is a small thing, easy to miss, but it is a kind of liberation, especially for young viewers learning what to think about their own bodies, the quiet message that there is no right way to look, that your body is not a problem, that the staggering variety of human forms is not a hierarchy with you somewhere near the bottom, but simply the way life comes. All of it fine, all of it accepted, all of it welcome in Elmore. And underneath all of these specific lessons is the larger truth about what the show becomes, over time, for the people who love it, which is a companion because a kind of friend, a steady presence that grows with you, that means one thing when you are a laughing child and another when you are a searching adult, that is always there to return to, always ready to teach you again whatever you are ready to learn. The people who grew up with Gumball did not just watch a show, they acquired a companion, a body of stories and characters and lessons woven into the fabric of who they became, available for the rest of their lives, a place to return to when the world is hard, a reservoir of quiet wisdom and quiet comfort that they can draw on whenever they need it. That is what the best stories become, not entertainment that we consume and forget, but companions that we keep, that live in us, that shape us and steady us and accompany us through the whole long journey of a life. So as we come at last to the edge of sleep, that is the final thing to hold, the sense of the show as a companion, a friend that has spent this whole night with you, teaching you gently, asking nothing, wanting only for you to be okay. It has walked you through its whole philosophy, the money and the choices, and the meaning of life, the love and the loss and the chaos and the gratitude. And it has done it the way a good friend does, not lecturing, but sharing, not demanding, but offering, letting you take what you need and leave the rest. And now it is ready to let you sleep, its lessons laid gently in you, its warmth surrounding you, its quiet insistence that you are okay, that your life is a gift, that you are loved and worthy and enough, settling over you like a blanket in the dark. You do not have to do anything with all of this tonight. You do not have to remember it, or apply it, or become a better person by morning. You only have to rest, to let the lessons settle where they will, to drift off held by the gentle wisdom of a show that loved its audience and wanted them to be happy. The wisdom will be there in the morning, and the morning after, woven quietly into you, ready whenever you need it. For now, there is nothing required, nothing to solve, nothing to fix. There is only you, and the quiet dark, and the soft accumulated warmth of 100 small lessons about how to live, and the permission granted freely to set it all down and sleep. Let me walk back through the lessons one last time, slowly, gently, the way you might trace a familiar path in the dark. Not to teach them again, but simply to let them settle. Each one a small warm stone to hold for a moment and set down. The lesson about money, that it is the foundation and not the substance. That love is the thing that was holding you up all along. The lesson of the dropped donuts. That peace comes not from choosing perfectly, but from choosing to love the life you chose. The lesson of the town full of answers, that the meaning of life is not a riddle to solve, but a life to live. The lesson of the void, that you matter, that no one is a mistake, that being ordinary is not a crime. Each one a small piece of how to be okay in a hard world gathered quietly as you drift. The lesson of the imperfect family, that love is not earned through competence, but given freely to the flawed. The lesson of looking up from the screen, of choosing the people in the room over the strangers on the glass. The lesson of the town of different art styles, that difference is not a problem but the texture of the world, to be met with welcome rather than fear. The lesson of impermanence, that everything passes and the only response is to be present for the good while it is here. The lesson of the schemes that always backfire, that honesty faced early is cheaper than the disaster of avoidance. The lesson of the broken shell, that to be loved you have to let yourself be seen. The lesson against comparison, that your worth is not relative, that looking sideways is the thief of joy. The lesson of the goldfish and the cat, that the deepest bonds are chosen ones, that you do not have to be impressive to be loved like that. The lesson of cheerful failure, that you can fail constantly and still be happy, that resilience is just getting up again. The lesson of the town of weirdos, that your strange specific self is the only interesting thing to be. The lesson of the anxious mind, that most of what we fear never comes. The lesson of the humanized villain, that cruelty comes from pain, that hurt people, and that understanding is the only thing that breaks the cycle. The lesson of the grateful goldfish, that wanting what you have is the most reliable path to happiness there is. The lesson of seeing your parents as people, flawed and frightened and doing their best, and forgiving them. The lesson of reconciliation, that love is not the absence of conflict but the commitment to keep repairing it. The lesson of imagination, that you can make an adventure out of nothing. The lesson of optimism, that hope is the braver choice. The lesson of anger, that even justified rage is dangerous to obey. The lesson of the failing school, that the judgment of a flawed system is not the truth about you. The lesson of generosity, that giving returns more than grabbing ever does. The lesson of words, that they build and break and last for decades, so choose them with care. The lesson of rest, that you cannot pour from an empty cup, that caring for yourself is not selfish. The lesson of everyday courage, the bravery of the apology and the owned mistake. The lesson of asking for help, that you were never meant to carry it all alone. The lesson of small joys, that a life is made of its ordinary days. The lesson of laughter, that humor is how you survive the things that are wrong. The lesson of self-compassion, that you do not have to be perfect to deserve your own love. And the largest lesson, underneath all the others, the one they all add up to, which is simply this: life is chaotic and imperfect and hard, and it is also a gift, an astonishing, improbable gift. And the secret to living it well is not to fix the chaos or escape the imperfection, but to love it, to be present for it, to be grateful for it, to fill it with kindness and laughter and connection, to be your strange self and forgive the people around you and cherish the small joys, and notice, while you still can, that this messy, ordinary life is the treasure you spent so long looking for. That is the whole of it. That is what the silliest show on television spent 6 seasons gently trying to tell you, and it is true, and it is yours now, and you can carry it into every day for the rest of your life. There is nothing left to do tonight but rest. The lessons are laid in you. The path has been walked, the warm stones are gathered and set down, and the show, that chaotic loving companion, has done what it always does, which is to leave you a little wiser and a little gentler and a little more okay than it found you, asking nothing in return, wanting only your rest and your happiness. So take them, the rest and the happiness, freely given, and let yourself drift, held by the quiet, carried by the gentle, accumulated wisdom of a blue cat and a goldfish and a family that figured out, against all odds, how to be happy in a hard and beautiful world. And when you wake tomorrow into your own chaotic, imperfect life, none of this has to change all at once. That is not how it works, and the show, which is so honest about how messy real change is, would never ask it of you. You will not become a perfectly grateful, perfectly present, perfectly kind person by morning, any more than Gumball ever stops scheming, or Richard ever stops failing, or Nicole ever fully tames her temper. The characters never finish growing, and neither will you. And that is not a failure, but simply the truth of being a work in progress, which is what everyone is, always, all the way to the end. The lessons are not a test you pass. They are a direction you face, a way you keep turning, gently, over a whole lifetime of small choices and small failures, and small fresh starts. So tomorrow, you might simply choose one small thing. You might notice one ordinary joy and let yourself be grateful for it. You might face one small hard thing honestly instead of scheming around it. You might forgive one small grievance, or rest when you need to instead of pushing through, or look up from the screen at someone you love, or be a little gentler with yourself when the harsh inner voice starts up. Just one small thing, the way the show's lessons always arrive in small things. A dropped box of donuts, a journey into a void, a shell finally broken. The whole philosophy lives in the small choices, and you can make one tomorrow and another the day after. And slowly, the way a chaotic family slowly becomes a happy one, your life can turn a little toward the light. That is the gift the show gives. In the end, the gift of a direction and a permission. The direction is toward gratitude and presence and kindness and authenticity and love. and the permission is to be imperfect on the way there. To be a chaotic mess like the Wattersons, and to be loved anyway, to fail and forgive and try again, to be exactly as flawed and as unfinished as you actually are, and to know that this too is okay. That you do not have to arrive anywhere to be worthy of love and rest and joy. You are allowed to be a work in progress. You are allowed to be chaotic and imperfect and still happy. You are allowed, the show insists, to love your messy life exactly as it is, while you keep gently working to make it kinder, the way the most chaotic family on television loved their messy life and were happy in it all along. So rest now, gently, in that permission. You have learned enough for one night, more than enough, a whole quiet philosophy of how to live, gathered in the dark. Tomorrow you can begin to live it, one small choice at a time. But tonight there is nothing to do, nothing to fix, nothing to become. Tonight you are simply a person at the end of a day, warm and safe and alive, held by the quiet, carrying inside you now the gentle accumulated wisdom of the silliest and the kindest of shows. Let it settle, let it stay, and let yourself drift down into sleep, loved and worthy and enough, exactly as you are, in your own chaotic, beautiful, imperfect life, which is, the show would remind you one last time as your eyes close, a gift. All of it, even the chaos, especially the chaos, a strange and improbable and precious gift, and yours, and good. It is worth noting, as a small comfort, that the show did not stay gone. Years after the original run ended, it returned, a revival arriving in 2025 to carry the Wattersons and their strange town to a whole new generation of children, and to the grown children who never stopped loving them. And there is something fitting in that return, because the lessons we have spent the night gathering are not the kind that expire, not tied to one moment or one generation, but the perennial truths that every new batch of children has to learn and every tired adult has to remember. A new generation will grow up with Gumball now, will absorb the same wisdom sideways through the same laughter. Will learn without knowing they are learning that happiness is love and not money. That everyone matters, that you should be your strange self and grateful for your ordinary days. The companion is being handed down, the way the best companions always are, from one generation to the next. And that is how wisdom actually travels, not in solemn books that few people read, but in the stories we love, the ones that lodge in us when we are young and stay. The songs and the cartoons and the tales that carry the oldest truths forward disguised as entertainment, slipping past our defenses, taking root before we even know what they are. Every generation has its vessels for this, its beloved stories that are secretly teaching it how to live, and for a generation of children, Gumball was one of the great ones, a chaotic comedy that turned out to be a quiet teacher, a silly show that was, all along, on the side of the children watching it, wanting them to grow up gentle and grateful and brave. That it returns now to do the same for new children is a kind of grace, the lessons refusing to die, the companion refusing to leave, the wisdom finding its way to the next set of hearts that need it. So let that be a final small comfort as you drift, the knowledge that the good things endure, that the wisdom gets passed down, that the silly kind show that taught you how to live is still out there teaching others, that nothing truly good is ever really lost but only handed forward, from one generation to the next, from one tired heart to the next, in the stories we love and carry and pass along. You are part of that now, part of the long chain of people who took something true from a chaotic little cartoon and carried it forward into their lives. And tonight you have added to it, deepened it, let the lessons settle a little further into you, ready to be lived tomorrow and, perhaps, one day passed along to someone else who needs them. There is a particular peace in that, in being part of something that outlasts you, a chain of wisdom and love stretching back before you and forward after you, in which you are just one link, carrying the good forward for a while before handing it on. The Wattersons are part of it. The show is part of it. You are part of it. And the lessons, the gentle accumulated wisdom of how to be happy in a hard world, will go on being learned and forgotten and relearned and passed along. Long after tonight, long after all of us as reliable and as renewable as the children who keep being born needing to learn them. That is a good thing to rest inside, the sense of belonging to something larger and kinder than yourself. A long, gentle human project of teaching each other, generation after generation, how to live. And tonight, your only part in it is to rest, and to carry, quietly in your sleeping heart, the small, warm wisdom you gathered in the dark. So let your breathing slow now, and let your thoughts go soft, because the lessons are all laid out, and there is nothing left for you to hold. We have gone through a great deal of wisdom tonight, an entire philosophy of living, hidden inside one of the silliest shows ever made. and you do not have to remember any of it in the morning. The lessons will keep. The show will keep. You can let it all dissolve into the quiet dark and hold on to only the warmth underneath, which is the part that was always the point. If your mind wants a last image to rest on, let it be the Watterson house at the end of one of its impossible days. The chaos finally quieted. The schemes and the disasters and the arguments all over for now. A loud, broke, ridiculous family in a small house in a strange town, settling down together at the end of everything, tired and together in home. Nicole, who could have had 1,000 other lives, choosing this one again. Richard, who failed at everything, beloved anyway. Anais, the genius, exasperated and adored. And Gumball and Darwin, the cat and the goldfish, brothers by love if not by blood. Side by side as always, facing tomorrow's chaos together the way they face everything, which is to say, together. It is not a perfect family, it is not a successful one, and it is, in every way that actually matters, one of the happiest because it figured out the secret the whole show was trying to teach, which is that the messy, imperfect loving life you actually have is the treasure, and the only thing required to be happy is to notice it. And let yourself rest in your own version of that, wherever you are tonight, because you have a messy, imperfect life of your own, with its own love in it somewhere, its own small warmth, its own reasons for gratitude hiding underneath the chaos. The show would want you to notice them, tonight, as you drift off. Not the things you lack, not the lives you did not choose, not the ways you have failed or the people who have more, but the simple, staggering gift of being alive at all, of having this day, this breath, this life, chaotic and imperfect and entirely yours. Darwin the goldfish would be amazed by it, your ordinary life. Amazed and grateful. And maybe that is the last and best lesson of all, to see your own life for a moment through the eyes of a creature who never expected to have one, and to be amazed, and to be grateful, and to rest. The Amazing World of Gumball was a show about a blue cat and his goldfish brother, and their chaotic, loving family in a strange little town. And it looked for all the world like pure, silly chaos. And it was secretly one of the wisest and kindest things ever put on television, a whole philosophy of how to live a good life smuggled to a generation of children inside the most disarming comedy imaginable. It taught them, sideways, through laughter, that happiness is love and not money, that the meaning of life is the living of it, that everyone matters, that you should be your strange self and be grateful for your ordinary days, and cherish the people in the room while you still have them. And it is still there, waiting, in all its chaos and all its wisdom, ready to teach those lessons again to anyone who looks closely enough to find them. Thank you for spending this long, quiet night here with me, finding the wisdom hidden in the chaos. I hope it carried you somewhere restful. I hope, wherever you are warm and safe and grateful tonight for your own messy, beloved life, and that you remember, as you drift off, that it is all a gift. Every bit of it, even the chaos, especially the chaos. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe